The vast command ship hung like a steel moon against the blackness of space. Commander Drell stood tall before the massive viewing window, his four arms clasped behind his back as he studied the blue-green planet below. Earth, the next world to join the mighty Valari Empire. Is this truly worthy of our attention? Drell asked, not turning to face the officers behind him. It looks ordinary. General Moore stepped forward, tablet in hand. Do not be fooled by appearances, Commander. Our scouts report this planet contains more environmental zones than any world we've previously encountered. Frozen wastelands, burning deserts, dense jungles, vast oceans, all on one small planet. Drell finally turned, his gray skin catching the light of nearby screens. The command center buzzed with activity as the Valari prepared for yet another conquest. For 800 years, they had swept across the galaxy, claiming world after world. Some fell easily, others fought. None prevailed. The natives? Drell asked. Humans, Moore replied, displaying images on the main screen. Physically weak. 2 arms, 2 legs, limited sensory abilities. Technologically advanced enough to be useful as workers, not advanced enough to pose any real threat. Drell nodded. The story was familiar. The Valari had conquered species that breathed fire, that stood 3 times their height, that could kill with a thought. Simple humans would present no challenge. What makes this world valuable? Drell moved to the tactical table where a 3-dimensional map of Earth rotated slowly. Resources, answered Science Officer Trell, joining them. The planet has abundant water, metals, and biological diversity. But most importantly, it sits at a strategic position near the edge of the spiral arm, a perfect forward base for our next expansion. Drell touched the hologram, zooming in on a landmass. Begin the standard protocol. Send in the first wave to establish bases here, here, and here. His long fingers marked 3 points on different continents. Commander, Trell hesitated. There is one unusual reading. The planet's biodiversity includes microorganisms unlike anything in our database. Perhaps we should conduct more tests before. We are Valari. Drell cut him off with a dismissive wave. We have conquered worlds with acid oceans and methane storms. We have defeated species with technologies far beyond these humans. What harm could tiny life forms do to us? The room fell silent. No one dared question Commander Drell, whose perfect record of conquests had earned him the nickname the Inevitable. Prepare the troops, Drell ordered. First wave launches in 6 hours. Later, in his private quarters, Drell reviewed the conquest plan. Earth would be his 50th world, a milestone no other Valari commander had reached. The High Command had promised him governorship of an entire sector upon his return. His communication screen lit up. Commander, reported an officer, the first assault ships are ready. All systems nominal. Proceed, Drell said. He allowed himself a small smile. Soon, Earth would be just another name on the long list of Valari conquests. As the first ships descended toward Earth's atmosphere, none of the mighty Valari noticed the small anomalies in their bioscans. None realized that the conquest they thought would be simple would instead become the greatest challenge their species had ever faced. On Earth below, humans went about their lives, unaware that they were about to teach the galaxy's greatest conquerors the true meaning of fear. The Valari landing ships cut through Earth's atmosphere like black knives, their hulls glowing red from the heat of entry. Captain Lorne stood at the command station, watching as the target zone, a remote forest in what humans called North America, grew larger on the view screen. Landing zone clear. No human defenses detected, reported his second-in-command. Perfect. Lorne smiled. This will be the easiest conquest in Valari history. The ships touched down in a clearing, crushing trees beneath their massive weight. 300 elite Valari soldiers disembarked, weapons ready but expecting little resistance. Their armor, designed to withstand extreme environments across the galaxy, gleamed in Earth's sunlight. That's when things began to go wrong. "Captain, something's affecting our breathing systems," a soldier called out, voice suddenly strained. Around him, other Valari were pulling at their helmets, their normally gray skin turning an alarming shade of blue. Lorne checked his instruments. "Oxygen levels higher than our standard. Adjust your filters." But the oxygen was just the beginning. Within an hour, half the landing party reported severe joint pain. Earth's gravity, slightly stronger than they had calculated, was compressing their bodies in unexpected ways. "Base camp established," Lorne reported to Commander Drell's ship orbiting above. "But we're experiencing difficulties." Drell's voice came through sharp with disappointment. "Difficulties? We've conquered worlds with gravity 3 times that of Earth." "It's not just the gravity, sir. It's everything. The air contains particles our filters missed. The soil harbors microbes that are already attacking our equipment. Even the local insects seem attracted to our biochemistry." As if to emphasize his point, a soldier nearby suddenly collapsed, body convulsing. Medics rushed to his side. "What's happening?" Drell demanded. "Unknown, sir. Some kind of allergic reaction." He touched a local plant. Back on the command ship, Drell slammed his fist against the console. "This is unacceptable. We've conquered acid worlds, ice planets, and fire moons. How can simple Earth plants challenge us?" He ordered immediate reinforcements, sending a second wave of troops with enhanced protective gear. But by the time they arrived, the first base camp was in chaos. 20 soldiers were dead, not from human resistance, but from anaphylactic shock after exposure to Earth pollen. Dozens more were incapacitated by microscopic parasites that had somehow penetrated their supposedly impenetrable armor. "Fall back to secondary position," Lorne ordered, his own breathing labored as he fought against an unknown infection. The second and third landing parties on other continents reported similar disasters. In the desert region, Valari soldiers found their cooling systems overwhelmed by the dry heat. In the tropical zone, fungal spores destroyed their communication equipment within hours. "Commander," General Moore approached Drell on the bridge. "We've lost contact with all 3 forward bases." Drell stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Red warning lights blinked where his invasion force should have been establishing control. "Impossible," he whispered. "We haven't even engaged the humans yet." "Sir, perhaps we should reconsider." "No," Drell cut him off. "I will not be the first Valari commander to retreat without firing a shot. Prepare my shuttle. I will lead the next wave personally." As Drell's shuttle prepared for descent, Science Officer Trell rushed to the launch bay, data tablet in hand. "Commander, wait. Our analysis shows the humans have evolved alongside these environmental challenges. Their bodies contain defensive systems we've never seen before." Drell paused at the shuttle door. "Are you suggesting these weak creatures are better adapted than the mighty Valari?" "I'm suggesting," Trell said carefully, "that perhaps we finally found a world that conquered its inhabitants rather than the other way around." Major Krav peered through the observation window at the captured human. The creature sat calmly at the metal table, showing none of the fear the Valari expected from a conquered species. This specimen, a scientist according to their intelligence, had been taken from a research facility near the human's 3rd largest city. "How long has it been in captivity?" Commander Drell asked, joining Krav at the window. 12 hours, sir, and still no signs of distress." Drell frowned. The human, Dr. Reed, according to the identification badge still attached to his white coat, appeared almost comfortable despite the alien environment of the Valari ship. "Begin the interrogation," Drell ordered. Inside the chamber, Reed looked up as Krav entered. The Major towered over him, 4 arms positioned to show dominance, skin reflecting the harsh lighting. "Human," Krav began, "explain how your species survives on this planet." Reed raised an eyebrow. "What exactly is confusing you about our survival?" Krav slammed 2 hands on the table. "Do not mock me. Your world has killed 43 of our soldiers without a single human firing a weapon. How do you endure these conditions? Evolution, Reed answered simply. 4 billion years of it, to be exact. Every human alive today comes from ancestors who survived plagues, climate shifts, predators, and each other. He leaned forward. May I ask a question of my own? Krav was taken aback by the human's boldness, but nodded. Why didn't you study our world more carefully before invading? In the observation room, Drell stiffened. The human spoke not as a captive, but as an equal. We studied enough, Krav replied. We've conquered worlds far more hostile than Earth. Reed smiled slightly, but never one so variable. Most planets have consistent conditions. Earth has everything from Arctic tundra to scorching deserts within a few thousand miles. We humans adapted to all of it. On a screen behind Krav, images appeared of humans living in extreme environments, climbing icy mountains, navigating burning deserts, diving deep underwater. Your weakest members couldn't survive a day in our armor, Krav said dismissively. We don't need armor, Reed countered. We have immune systems that fight off millions of microbes daily. We have sweat that regulates our temperature. We have intestines that can digest almost anything organic. Drell watched the exchange with growing concern. This human wasn't just surviving captivity. He was studying them, learning their weaknesses. What about disease? Krav asked. Many of our soldiers are sick with unknown ailments. Earth has more microorganisms than stars in the galaxy, Reed explained. We evolved alongside them. Your bodies have no defense against them because you've never encountered anything like them. In the observation room, Science Officer Trell hurried in with new data. Commander, the human speaks the truth. Their biological adaptability exceeds anything in our records. Their bodies contain symbiotic relationships with over 10,000 species of microorganisms. Drell's 4 hands clenched into fists. And we brought them onto our ships, he realized aloud. Back in the interrogation room, Reed watched Krav's reaction carefully. The Valari officer's skin had taken on a grayish pallor, a sign of stress. Reed guessed. Your species conquered worlds by overwhelming them with superior technology, Reed said. But Earth conquered us humans long ago, and we made peace with it. We learned to adapt rather than dominate. As if to emphasize his point, Krav suddenly staggered, grabbing the table for support. Medical emergency, shouted a voice over the intercom. As Krav was rushed from the room, Reed remained seated, observing every detail of Valari biology and behavior. The information would be useful if he could escape. In the corridor outside, Drell turned to Trell. This changes everything. The human isn't just a prisoner. He's a threat. But neither alien noticed the small Earth microbes already spreading through their ship's ventilation system, carried there on the body of one seemingly harmless human scientist. The Valari command ship shuddered as Commander Drell slammed his fist against the tactical display. Red warning lights blinked across the holographic map of Earth, each one representing a failed landing zone or disabled assault force. How? He demanded of his officers. How are they defeating our best troops? General Moore stepped forward cautiously. Sir, the humans aren't defeating us. Earth is. Drell's eyes narrowed. Explain. Our forces are suffering from what the medical team is calling Earth sickness. It starts with respiratory difficulty, then progresses to fever, muscle weakness, and eventually organ failure. Over 300 soldiers are now incapacitated. The door to the command center slid open, and a security officer rushed in. Commander, the human prisoner has escaped. Drell spun around. Dr. Reed. How? He appeared to be unconscious. When the medical team entered his cell to examine him, he overpowered them. He's taken a shuttlecraft. Impossible. No human could pilot our technology. He didn't need to pilot it, Science Officer Trell interjected, checking the data on his screen. He merely disabled the autopilot safeguards and let gravity pull the craft to Earth. Drell's rage was palpable. In 8 centuries of conquest, no Valari commander had suffered such humiliation. "Launch the main invasion force," he ordered. "Target their major population centers. We will show these humans that the Valari cannot be resisted." 2,000 ships descended toward Earth, their weapons primed. Unlike the previous surgical strikes, this was to be an overwhelming display of force. Cities in every continent were targeted simultaneously. On Earth, Dr. Reed stumbled from the crashed shuttle into the arms of waiting military personnel. "They're coming," he gasped. "Full invasion." General Thomas, commander of Earth's Unified Defense Forces, helped Reed to his feet. "Did you get what we needed?" Reed nodded, pulling a small device from his pocket. "Everything. Their biology, technology, weaknesses, it's all here." In the command bunker below, Reed laid out what he had learned. The Valari have conquered countless worlds, but always by overwhelming force. They've never needed to adapt because their technology protected them, until now. "What's happening to them?" Thomas asked. "Earth's microbiome is treating them like any other invasive species. Their bodies have no defense against our bacteria, viruses, fungi, pollen. Even our food is toxic to them." Above them, the first wave of the main Valari invasion force entered Earth's atmosphere, but something was wrong. Ships veered off course, their pilots struggling to maintain control. "Commander," a Valari officer called out in panic aboard the lead ship. "The systems are failing." Across the invasion force, ships reported similar problems. The microorganisms that had infected the earlier landing parties had spread throughout their fleet, attacking the bioorganic components of their technology. On the ground, Valari troops that successfully landed found themselves facing not just human military resistance, but an environment that seemed determined to reject them. Soldiers collapsed from mysterious allergic reactions. Communication systems failed as microscopic Earth life consumed their components. Weapons misfired when exposed to Earth's humidity. Commander Drell watched in horror as the invasion disintegrated into chaos. "This cannot be happening." "Sir," General Moore reported, his voice weak as he too showed symptoms of Earth sickness. "The humans are counterattacking. They're using projectile weapons filled with their own biological material." It was true. Human forces, guided by Dr. Reed's intelligence, had created weapons that didn't need to kill the Valari directly. They simply exposed them to concentrated doses of Earth's microbiome. "Fall back," Drell finally ordered, his perfect record in ruins. "Retreat to high orbit." As the surviving Valari ships limped back to space, Earth's defenders celebrated their first victory. But Dr. Reed warned General Thomas, "They'll be back. The Valari have never failed a conquest before. Drell won't accept defeat." "Then we'll be ready," Thomas replied, watching the Valari ships retreat. "Earth has been teaching creatures to fear it since the first dinosaurs. These aliens are just the latest to learn that lesson." High above Earth, the remnants of the Valari fleet hung in orbit like wounded predators. Inside the command ship, the air filtration systems hummed at maximum capacity, struggling to remove the Earth contaminants that had followed the retreating forces. Commander Drell stood before the Valari High Command, their faces projected on the viewscreen before him. His once immaculate uniform was stained, and his gray skin had taken on a sickly yellowish tint. "You have failed, Commander," said the High Elder, her voice cold with disappointment. "The mission is delayed, not failed," Drell insisted. "I request reinforcements and specialized equipment. Earth is more challenging than anticipated, but no world is unconquerable." The High Elder exchanged glances with her colleagues. "Very well. One final attempt. The honor of the Valari Empire demands it." On Earth, Dr. Reed and General Thomas stood in an underground laboratory surrounded by scientists from every nation. The global response to the alien threat had united former enemies into a single fighting force. "The Valari will return," Reed explained, projecting the data he had stolen from their ships. "They've never abandoned a conquest, but now we understand their weakness." He displayed microscopic images on the large screen. Their biology has no defense against Earth's microorganisms because they've never needed to develop one. Their technology has protected them across thousands of worlds. So how do we use this against them? Thomas asked. Reed smiled grimly. We use Earth itself as a weapon. Over the next 2 weeks, human forces prepared while monitoring the Valari fleet. New reinforcements arrived daily, swelling the alien armada to over 5,000 ships. In the command ship, Drell reviewed the new battle plan with his officers. Many wore breathing apparatuses, still suffering from Earth sickness despite the ship's purification attempts. The humans think they've won, Drell said, but we now understand their advantage and have countered it. Our new environmental suits are sealed against all biological contaminants. Science Officer Trell looked unconvinced. Commander, I must again suggest we reconsider. Earth's biodiversity exceeds anything in our records. We cannot possibly prepare for all. Enough, Drell snapped. I will not be the first Valari commander to retreat in defeat. Prepare the troops. We attack at dawn. On Earth, dawn broke over the main defensive position, where General Thomas received the alert. They're coming. Over 2,000 dropships approaching. Reed nodded. Right on schedule. The Valari descent was majestic and terrible. Thousands of ships darkened the sky as they pushed through the atmosphere, their weapons already firing at human positions. This time, the aliens were prepared. Each soldier wore a completely sealed environmental suit. Their weapons had been modified to function in Earth's atmosphere. Their vehicles hovered above the ground, avoiding direct contact with the contaminated soil. Their adaptations are impressive, Reed noted as he watched the defensive screens. Will our plan still work? Thomas asked. It has to, Reed replied, because we can't match their firepower. The Valari ground forces advanced confidently toward the main human defensive position, a seemingly ordinary mountain valley. Commander Drell himself led the assault, determined to salvage his reputation. The humans are retreating, reported a scout. Their forces are falling back to that ridge. Drell smiled behind his protective mask. Pursue them. Victory is at hand. But as the Valari forces entered the valley, hidden devices activated in the surrounding forest. Massive pumps began spraying a fine mist into the air. A concentrated solution developed from thousands of Earth's most aggressive microorganisms, enhanced to penetrate even the smallest breach in the alien's protective gear. Something's wrong with my suit, a Valari soldier cried out. Others began reporting similar issues as microscopic Earth life found tiny imperfections in their supposedly impenetrable armor. In the command center, Reed watched the alien advance falter. Now, he said quietly. Thomas gave the order, and human forces emerged from hidden positions surrounding the disoriented Valari troops. Not with overwhelming firepower, but with something the aliens had never encountered before, a coordinated defense that used Earth itself as an ally. For the first time in Valari history, a conquest wasn't merely stalled. It was failing. Commander Drell stumbled through the mud, his once pristine environmental suit torn and useless. Around him, the remnants of his elite force struggled against conditions that seemed to worsen by the minute. The valley had become a death trap. Commander, wheezed his second-in-command, the eastern flank has collapsed. General Moore is dead. Drell's communicator crackled with the voice of the Valari High Command. Commander Drell, the situation is untenable. You are ordered to withdraw all forces immediately. For a moment, he stood frozen, 4 hands clenched into tight fists. In 8 centuries of conquest, no Valari commander had ever received such an order. No, he replied, his voice hard. The Valari do not retreat. Send more troops. Send our entire fleet if necessary. Your request is denied, came the cold response. The cost is too great. Withdraw now. Drell ripped the communicator from his suit and crushed it beneath his foot. Gather all remaining forces, he ordered. We strike at their command center directly. From a hidden observation post, Dr. Reed watched the Valari movements through high-powered binoculars. "They're regrouping," he reported to General Thomas. "But something's wrong. Their formation is chaotic." Thomas studied the tactical display. "Our intelligence suggests their high command has ordered a retreat, but Drell is refusing to comply." "He can't accept defeat," Reed said. "It goes against everything the Valari believe about themselves." The weather was turning, dark clouds gathering on the horizon. The first snowflakes began to fall as temperatures dropped rapidly. "Perfect timing," Thomas said, looking at the sky. "Winter is coming early this year." The Valari had never encountered snow before. Their environmental suits, already compromised by Earth's microorganisms, began to malfunction in the cold. Ice formed in breathing tubes. Joints froze. Vision screens fogged over. Still, Commander Drell drove his forces forward, abandoning their disabled vehicles to march on foot toward the human command center. "Sir," pleaded one of his officers, "many of our soldiers can't continue. The cold is killing them." "Then they die with honor," Drell snarled. "Forward." The human defenders waited in prepared positions, their bodies accustomed to the cold, their equipment designed for winter warfare. They watched as the alien force struggled through deepening snow, each step becoming more difficult. "They're adapting," Reed noted with reluctant admiration. "Look how they're mimicking our movement patterns through the snow." Thomas nodded. "But it won't be enough. Not with what's coming." As night fell, the temperature plummeted further. The Valari, whose homeworld never experienced anything below what humans would consider a mild autumn day, began to suffer catastrophic system failures. Their biology had no defense against such cold. In orbit, the Valari fleet received the emergency signal from the last functioning communication unit on the ground. The message was simple: send extraction immediately. Forces decimated. The High Elder herself took command of the rescue operation. "All ships, prepare for emergency evacuation. This conquest is terminated." On the ground, Drell watched as his remaining troops were loaded onto the rescue ships. His forelimbs shook with cold and rage as a junior officer approached. "Commander, your extraction ship is waiting." "I'm not leaving," Drell replied. "But sir, the High Command has ordered." "I will not be the first Valari commander to return in defeat," Drell interrupted. "Go, tell them I died fighting." As the rescue ships lifted off, carrying the broken remnants of the once mighty invasion force, Drell turned to face the human lines one last time. Snow coated his shoulders as he stood defiant, a lone figure against the white landscape. From their observation post, Reed and Thomas watched the Valari evacuation. "They're actually leaving," Thomas said in disbelief. "All except one." Reed pointed to the solitary figure of Commander Drell. "Should we capture him?" Thomas asked. Reed considered for a moment. "No. Let's see what he does." This might be the first time in their history that the Valari have had to learn rather than conquer. As Earth's night deepened, the mightiest invasion force the galaxy had ever known flowed from a world that had taught them the meaning of fear. 1 year after the failed invasion, a single Valari ship entered Earth's atmosphere. Unlike the black warships of the invasion fleet, this vessel was smaller, with no visible weapons. It descended slowly toward the designated landing zone, a neutral meeting ground in what humans called Switzerland. Inside the ship, Ambassador Kell adjusted her ceremonial robes nervously. "Are you certain this is wise?" she asked her companion. Former Commander Drell, now stripped of his military rank, nodded slowly. His once proud posture was humbled, his gray skin bearing the scars of Earth's harsh winter. "They could have killed me. Instead, they saved me." The ship touched down gently on the snowy field. A delegation of humans waited nearby, led by General Thomas and Dr. Reed. When the Valari emerged, many humans gasped. These were not the fearsome warriors they remembered, but diplomats carrying symbols of peace according to Valari custom. Their forearms held open, showing no weapons. "On behalf of the Valari High Council," Ambassador Kell began, "I come to offer terms of peace and mutual recognition." General Thomas stepped forward. Earth accepts your peaceful arrival. We are prepared to discuss terms. Inside the neutral conference building, the two species sat across from each other. For the Valari, this moment was unprecedented. Never before had they negotiated as equals with the species they had attempted to conquer. Our scientists have studied the data from our encounter, Ambassador Kell said carefully. We have come to understand something remarkable about your world and your species. Dr. Reed leaned forward. And what is that? That true strength is not in domination, but in adaptation, she replied. For thousands of years, we conquered through superior force. We never needed to adapt because our technology protected us. Drell spoke up, his voice rough from damage caused by Earth's atmosphere. But Earth taught us differently. Your species doesn't try to master your world through force. You learn to live with it, to change yourselves rather than changing your environment. Thomas nodded. It's how we survived. Earth has been trying to kill us since we first evolved. We had no choice but to adapt. This wisdom, Ambassador Kell said, is valuable beyond measure. The Valari High Council proposes not just peace, but alliance. We offer our technology in exchange for your knowledge of adaptation. The negotiations continued for days, eventually resulting in the Earth-Valari Accord. Earth would remain sovereign and protected. No Valari military forces would ever again enter Earth's space without permission. In exchange, humans would share their biological and medical knowledge with the Valari. As the diplomatic party prepared to return to their homeworld, Drell approached Dr. Reed privately. I request permission to stay, he said simply. Reed looked surprised. Stay? On Earth? Why? To learn, Drell replied. Your world almost killed me, yet I find myself drawn to understand it. I wish to study how humans have mastered living in harmony with such a deadly planet. 6 months later, Drell stood on a mountain peak, breathing Earth's air without assistance for the first time. His body had been modified using techniques developed by human and Valari scientists working together, the first of his kind to be adapted to Earth, rather than protected from it. Dr. Reed joined him at the summit. How does it feel? He asked. Painful, Drell admitted. But also, right. For centuries, we Valari believed strength came from conquering worlds. Now I understand true strength comes from being able to live on them. Below them, the first joint human-Valari research center was under construction. Above them, stars twinkled in the night sky, no longer territories to be conquered, but mysteries to be explored together. The High Council has reclassified Earth in our records, Drell said as they watched the sunset. It is now listed as the most challenging world in known space. Future Valari will study your planet not as conquerors, but as students. As darkness fell over the mountain, the former enemies stood side by side, united by a new understanding that the greatest power in the universe was not the ability to conquer deadly worlds, but the wisdom to adapt to them.